So this video is going to look at some tips and tricks in editing. We did a video last week which showed various useful little features in Adaptable, and the feedback was really positive, but one of the requests was, could we make them more kind of function specific? So this week we're going to look at some editing tips, and then in future videos we'll look at styling, exporting, searching, etc. So what we have here is a meaningless data set, totally useless dummy data. Doesn't really mean anything at all, but you can see we have a kind of a column called status, a column called counterparty, and a few other fairly meaningless columns. Some of these are read-only, some of these are editable, and then we'll kind of build up the tips and tricks as we go. So the first thing we're going to look at is cell styles. At the moment, it's very hard if you're a user to know which columns and which cells are editable and which aren't. And so we're going to sort of show how in Adaptable you can do that. Now, unlike in most other videos, this one, because we're using a lot of tips around editing, is going to be more code-based, because most of the kind of cool features you can do with editing are done at design time through edit options and through other options rather than at runtime. Let's have a look at, so here is a basic code base. This is the code used for this. At the moment it's really empty. So as I say, the first thing we're going to look at is to create editable cell styles, and you do that through user interface options. And so in your Adaptable options, you can add user interface options, and that has two properties here of interest: an editable cell style, so this styles all cells which are editable, or rather, you can add a read-only cell style which styles those cells which are non-editable. Here for the moment I've done both, just to make it kind of clear, and this uses the style object where you can add fonts and you can add italics and all sorts of stuff. So in fact, why don't we do that now? So we can say font style where it's editable is italicized. And so here we've added a border of brown and we've made it italic for editable cells, and we've said read-only cells are pink. So now if I save that and if I go into here, you can see that the 4 columns which are read-only are pink, and then all these cells in all these columns are editable. Okay, so we'll now take away that pink because it's kind of going to be quite annoying. So that's the first tip and trick, is a nice easy way to show any cells which are editable. The next thing we're going to look at is adding another level of what is read-only and what is editable. So at the moment, the reason why trade ID, currency, country and notional are read-only is because those columns were defined in AG grid as editable false. But for instance, you might want to have a more fine-tuned approach. And in fact, in this demo, we're going to look particularly at this status column. So for instance, you might say that it doesn't make sense for any trade which has a status of, say, completed or of booked to be editable, because you don't really want to edit it. You only want to edit once it's kind of in progress or it's pending. So you do that through edit options, and that has a function called isCellEditable, and that function takes each cell and it returns whether that cell is editable or not. And then you also need to provide a general true for all other cells. So if we go back into our code, let's add a edit option section, and here we are. This is a function isCellEditable. It takes a grid cell, and then what we've said is this grid cell object takes a column, a raw value, a normalized value, display value, blah blah blah. So it's got lots of information about each cell. And what we've said, if the column is status, then if the display value is not completed or is not booked, then basically they're not editable. Otherwise, everything else is editable. And then if we save that and if we run it, we now see that all the other columns obviously stay editable. But here, completed and booked are now no longer editable, but all other ones are editable. So that's a nice additional way of allowing you to decide which cells are editable or not. And because you have the whole row, you can actually say, you know, it's not only on this column itself, but you can say this is only editable if, you know, counterparty is this and currency is this and blah, 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 based on other values in the row or indeed in the whole grid. Now, as you can see, if I want to edit, say, the counterparty column, I'm able to, and I can put in a new value, or likewise in any editable cell in the status column, I can do that. But by default, that just shows me a text box, which is fine if you want to put in new values, but you might want to limit those values. You might want to say there's only a certain selection of permitted values that can go into this cell. And again, you can do that in Adaptable, and again, you do it at design time, and that's through something called edit lookup items. So let's see how that works. You put them also into user interface options, and essentially you can say these columns are going to have edit lookups. And what that means is, if I now go back into my code, when I go into this cell, I now automatically get a drop down which shows all the distinct values in this column at the moment. So if I go into here, I can see all the different statuses. And that's the default, and that's useful. But of course, you might want something a little bit more targeted. For instance, you might say, well, I actually don't want my user to be able to select any value here. I don't want all the values available in this column to be displayed in the drop down. I only want some. So you can do that by adding a value to the list of editable lookup items. So if we go back into edit lookup items, and now we add a second one, and what we will do is we will take status out of here. So now we said counterparty would be dynamic, it would take all the values in the counterparty column, but for status, the only values available can be in progress and completed. They're the only two statuses that the user can choose. And now if we go back to our grid, we will see that if I go into here, I only see in progress and completed, but for counterparties, I see all the available values in the grid. So that's the second stage of edit lookup items. But in fact, you might want to go a stage further, because you might want to say, well, if the trade is rejected, I might have a different set of available statuses to, for instance, if it's pending. Okay, so you might want to change what is in the dropdown depending either on the column itself or indeed on other values in the row. And again, you could obviously do that in Adaptable, and you do it through a function. So essentially, instead of the user providing you with a hard-coded list of values, what you can do is you can decide it based on the context. So we have this, we pass in this object called edit lookup context, and that takes the grid cell, and it also takes this permitted values context, which has the column and has the row and has various other things. So in this example here, we've said if the current status is in progress, then I only want completed to be available. But if the status is pending, then I want in progress and completed to be available. And obviously you can make this as complicated as you want based on the row, based on anything you want. So now, if we go back here, we can see that when we do in progress, we just see completed. But when we do pending, where's a pending trade? Have we got one? Here's one, here's pending. We can see we get these two. So their edit lookup items are a really nice way of being able to manage in a much more granular level what's available to the user when it comes to editing. Now, so far, everything we've looked at has been what you might call inline edit, and that's very useful, and it allows you to kind of make, helpful edits there and then. But sometimes you might want a more kind of overview approach. You might not want your users to edit cells here or there. You might want them to edit in a more controlled manner. And Adaptable makes that available through something called action row buttons. And the way they work is, again, you do it through options. Before we do it, let's just suppress the edit. So by suppressing the edit, what that does, this is an AG grid options thing, and it means now that I can no longer edit any cell, which is what we want, because we're going to add some action row buttons. Now, in fact, there's 4 different action row buttons that you can add. There's edit, delete, create, clone. For our example, we just want to have an edit, and you do it through action options. There's the action row buttons, and we've added an edit button. And what that does is it adds it here. If you want to, you can add it somewhere else. And now whenever we click this button, it will create a automatic form for that row with every value. And again, you can choose which ones are available. And you'll notice that anything which is read-only, such as currency, is obviously read-only, and anything which is editable is editable. And again, if it's a number, it becomes a numeric edit. If it's a date, it becomes a date picker, and they're completely. We're not going to look at those in this tips and tricks, but obviously all those edit controls are completely configurable in Adaptable. But what's also nice is it remembers. So, for instance, because it's in progress, I only get completed. But if I went to do, say, a pending one, then it will give me both of those. And by default, what happens is any changes you make get updated to the grid. So, for instance, if I change counterparty, say, to BAML, and then I save it, you'll see that that became BAML. So that's a nice way of managing inline edit. Instead of doing it kind of at a cell level, you automatically create a form, and that form knows what's an edit lookup, it knows what's available, and it allows you to do it. But sometimes you might not want users to edit the form directly, or rather edit the grid directly. You might want either a last look, or you might want the data, say, to go to the server, and then to update the server, and then to feed back into the client that way. So you kind of do that round trip. And that's also available in Adaptable. And the way you do it is, the first thing you will do is you change auto handle to false. So in our action options, which are here, we can say auto handle is false. And now what that does is it means actually nothing happens. So for instance, if let's take this first line here. So that's Goldman Sachs. If I change Goldman Sachs to BNP and I save, you'll see nothing's happened because we've turned it off. So obviously the question then is, how can we make that happen? How can we listen to the changes? And you do it through an adaptable event. Adaptable provides many events, pretty much anything which you want to listen to in a grid we make available. Filters change, data change, cell changes, etc., etc. And this one is the action row submitted event. And obviously, as the name implies, it listens to any action row being submitted, and it allows you to do whatever you want to do. So here, after we've initialized Adaptable, we'll listen to the event. It's the action row submitted event. That provides info, and that info gives you everything you need to know about all the data that's being given to you. There's actually different types, whether it's edited or deleted or created, etc. And what we've basically done here is we've taken the edit info, and here we're just going to update it. We're just calling an Adaptable update grid data with the form data. So essentially it's picking up the form data from the form, and we are in fact going to update Adaptable. What you would do, obviously, is you would then check it, you could validate it, you could update your server, as I say, and do the round trip. But now let's check that works. So if we go back into Adaptable this time, and now in this time, the first row is JP Morgan. So if I was to edit this row and then say it's going to be Credit Suisse, now when I save it, it does get saved because we've listened to the event and it's done everything we've wanted it to do. The final tip and trick we're going to look at is a nice little one with Smart Edit. It's something which kind of quite a few users have asked us to do. So Smart Edit out of the box provides 4 or 5 different operations. I think it's 4. So for instance, if I select all these cells and I want to multiply them all by 10, I can do that. I can click 10 and you can see they all change. Or if I want to add 100 to all of those, then you can do it as many times as you want. But users might want their own particular edit operations. For instance, you might want, something where you're adding 5 bips or you're adding VAT or whatever it is you want to add, where we can't know what the operation is. So we allow you, the users, to provide your own custom operations, and they're called Smart Edit custom operations, and you add them through edit options. So if I go back into edit options, which is here, I'm now adding this Smart Edit custom operation, and this example here, we're adding power, and as you can imagine, it just basically powers the raw value with whatever the Smart Edit value is. So let's see how that works. So now if we go back into our grid, let's say for instance we want to square that one, so we can select this cell, and now here we now see power is now being added to our Smart Edit operation, and then if I want to square it, I just do 2, and then there we are, it becomes 64. And obviously you can do as much as you want. So for instance, if we want to make that to the power of 10, you can do that, and then there we are, it changes. So they're nice ways of being able to edit your own operations, and you can either do it through the toolbar, or in fact you can do it through the right click menu, where you can again provide your own, and then it updates it for you. So hopefully that's some useful tips and tricks around editing in Adaptable, allowing you to see what is editable, allowing you to create your own lookup items for where you want it, allowing you to provide your own dynamic forms to make editing available either directly or a round trip through an event, and then finally a nice little addition to Smart Edit that allows you to provide your own Smart Edit operations. I hope these tips and tricks were useful. Thanks for watching. If you've got any questions you'd like to learn more about editing in Adaptable, or indeed about all the other features that we provide, please get in touch, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.